I have been playing Warhammer 40,000 since 2nd edition. I have preferences and dislikes for rules of the past, but this is not about the past. It is about the future. I just get the feeling that I'm under some sort of social contract that I can't go at like more than 2 videos without mentioning I've been playing since 2nd edition. But right now, Games Workshop is working on the 11th edition of Warhammer 40,000, as we are about halfway through 10th edition of Warhammer 40,000, assuming that they follow the 3-year release schedule. We don't know if they will, they haven't said so. And they also don't officially refer to their game by edition numbers, only we fans do that so that people can keep up. But once Games Workshop has the rules for 10th edition worked out, or as worked out as they can, then they decide what big changes to make to the edition. So 10th edition cut down on the layers of rules, but only a bit. I know that some people were not happy that it was a bit simplified compared to the hard to learn, rewarding to master aspects of 9th edition. But as someone who plays several armies and switches between them often, I am really enjoying 10th edition. The codexes continue to come out slowly, with only Blood Angels in the final 3 months of 2024, and it is expected that we will have the same ending situation to 10th edition as 9th edition. Some codexes won't get much play before the edition changes. The Imperial Guard Codex was available for everyone in shops around February 2023, and we were already gearing up for a new edition in March 2023. Not great. I'm expecting Drukhari to come near the end, as they have already had a bonus detachment to work with, and Votann also near the end, as they had Crusade rules released in White Dwarf. It is a sign that there will be not much support for them elsewhere for a while. The good news is that 11th edition should be compatible with 10th edition, much like 6th and 7th, and 8th and 9th. Rules will change, plans will change, but not super drastically. This isn't going to stop me from suggesting some drastic changes, along with some minor ones. The first part is the rules. Keep the rules simple. 10th edition was much better than 9th edition to learn and keep up with. Can a new player see and understand all parts of their army very quickly to help them get into it? With a massive rules, you just couldn't in 9th edition. I will say, if you played one army, you got great depth to explore your codex, if 40k was your life. Otherwise, you did what most people do and look up the best way to make an army list online, and skip to that and get to the tabletop. If you played several armies, as I did, it was painful to switch back and forth as the weight of unique rules to relearn kept hitting you. In 40k, we have a thing which we've had for as long as I've been playing, where one player takes their whole turn, and then the other player takes their whole turn. This is known as I go, you go. I don't think we should quite get rid of it, but make it more involved. Wargames that don't have I go, you go are more dynamic. You don't have to be waiting for someone's movement phase to be over. But 10th edition, like Horus Heresy, has reactions, which are cool. You could still have reactions in 11th edition. I move up a unit, you shoot at full ballistic skill, but that is it for your unit. You can't activate it more or move it later in the battle round, or on your next turn. If your unit had already activated, you could use a command point to Overwatch, but only hitting on 6s and no torrent weapons. If I go, you go left, it would get rid of a big problem we had from 8th edition. If you go first, you would win. Because you get to shoot first, you can alpha strike and do a lot of damage to your opponent, and they just had to sit there. And in 8th edition, the player going second still scored at the start of their turn, so turn 5 was usually pointless for them to play out. But I know that Knight players and Custodes players would not like a swing to the other way of totally removing I go, you go and having alternate activations, because then a Genestealer Cult opponent could make dud activations. The Knight player has to move their entire army very quickly, and then the Genestealer Cult player gets to react with everything and goes unimpeded. I did mention Overwatch. Overwatch is a problem. Overwatch should be at least 2 command points, or get rid of it. It is so very strong. You can use it in the movement phase or the charge phase, and unlike all of the other core stratagems, you can build a unit to capitalize on Overwatch and make it very, very strong. For torrent weapons, it is basically a second shooting phase for 1 command point, although you don't get any shooting phase bonuses and can't use things like big guns never tire. If we are keeping it, instead of making it 2 command points, which is an option, return to the 2nd edition version, which is very similar to what we currently get in boarding actions. If you don't shoot in your shooting phase but were eligible to, as an action, you can have an Overwatch token. And then you can fire Overwatch in your opponent's movement phase, but at -1 to hit, or stick with only hitting on 6s. You shoot later, you shoot once, and worse than normal. As a balance to I go, you go first player advantage, if that is still around, the second player could have all of their units start with Overwatch tokens. To balance the more combat-focused armies, like the World Eaters, you could have units start with a Surge move token instead. Once per turn per unit, after an enemy has hit you with a shooting attack, you can expend a token to move d6. This could get you out of line of sight, or just get closer. I think Games Workshop will continue to update their terminology as they have found that things working sort of how they were in 9th edition but they've added some extra bits need their own terms. So I would include a set up move as terminology. Right now we have normal move with capital letters, advance move, and remain stationary. There's also things like charge move. But the rules have had to twist and flip over themselves to explain what setting up from reserves is. So when you set up a unit from reserves, it is like a normal move in that even though you are not moving the models anymore, they have not, in capitalized words, remained stationary. It doesn't trigger reactive moves to be set up from reserves, and it doesn't remove cult ambush tokens. So we need a term for it so that we can understand it better. I would say deployment move, but that might get confused with deployment, so having a set up move makes it pretty clear. Do the same for surge moves. They are pretty common. Define them as a term, as they may generate other reactive moves. If they're not meant to, then the need to be something other than a normal move, and as they are a move that can take you into an engagement range, let that also be explained in the main rules, although different factions have different kinds of moves. And define reactive move. We use the term, but is that meant to be reacted to? Am I meant to be able to reactive move my dominions after an enemy termagant unit does a reactive move? It seems like I can at the moment, but we don't know if that was intentional. I need a slight tangent here to explain the next bit better. We're still on gameplay, but Games Workshop should stop focusing on the tournament things. Sure, there were 3 tournament players who played Deathwatch as a Space Marine army, but I got hundreds of comments from different Deathwatch players who found my channel wanting to let me, of all people, know what they thought about the Deathwatch changes. Tournaments create this idea of the intended way to play, and it's just not. You don't have to play 2,000 points. You don't have to have the terrain set up in this way. You can, and should, use Legends units. But in a weird way, a sort of twist, Games Workshop doesn't actually support the competitive scene. It uses the competitive scene. It can have articles being like, hey, this person won this competitive event and they use these models, buy our models. And they use the competitive events as a place to draw data from when making balance patches and points updates. That can be useful for curbing the worst excesses, but it can make things a bit off at a casual level. Drukhari are a menace to many local gaming clubs, but they have not won any big tournaments in a while. So Games Workshop won't change them right now because at a competitive tournament level, they should be given an easier time, which seems sadistic, appropriate, to casual players being destroyed by Jonathan the Accountant's scantily clad space elf women. If there was, say, a community pool for what we players would like to see, where we could enter even checkboxes. This unit should be given a points decrease, this unit should be given a points increase. You have to pick one of each for your faction. That could be better. I know only the most involved players would answer, but even if you're thinking of skewing things like, oh yes, the Genestealer Cult Ridge Runner, that is just too many points. There should be a large enough sample to mitigate that. It would provide another dataset, one that isn't hardcore. Competitive events are something Games Workshop will use for their ends, but they don't support the competitive events in the way that other game systems do. They're not actually competitive focused the way that esports are, or Magic the Gathering. Games Workshop does not financially support travel for like the best players who they can make into their stars and say, hey, this is the best Genestealer Cult player. Look at how they play Genestealer Cult. Buy their models. Because that would mean spending money. And when they have events, tournament events, there are no big cash prizes for the winners. Maybe this does keep things a bit more casual in tone. There is no money on the line, But Games Workshop has this weird parallel thing with the competitive scene. They make specialized rules for it, and people follow those rules. And I bet you also use the tournament rules in some of your casual games. When was the last time you saw someone use the objective marker rules from the main rulebook, where it's a solid item you can't step on? Almost everyone uses the tournament version of the objective rules, and so I have to keep hitting my head against the wall, to say, hey, you can use legends. It doesn't matter if tournaments don't use legends, you can use legends. And actually a lot of tournaments that are not run by Games Workshop use legends rules. It's a weird thing, but hey, Games Workshop's rules are weird. It's almost like they need to define the different ways to play 40k, much like they did in 8th edition. This was the point I was going towards. If Games Workshop defined the ways to play with set out rules explaining what can be used where, it makes everything easier for everyone. If it's like, hey, you are playing matched play at a club with your friends, you can use legend rules, any kind of terrain setup you want, and so on. If you're playing this specific tournament pack, you don't use the match play cards where you draw them to find out your mission, you use this set mission and this set twist on this set board. 8th edition was good as a start, setting out open play, narrative play, and competitive play. Then there were extra rules for tournaments which operated as a competitive plus system, and it sort of broke down from there. It was then not clearly laid out in the different settings what version of 40k you were playing. Games Workshop has Legends rules. Look, I'm just going to link the video now so you know more about Legends. But Games Workshop is saying that they are used in all game modes, like Crusade and Casual Competitive, which is an awful term meant to represent the everyday 40k game at a club or at a friend's house. This term is in their social media posts, but not in rulebooks. So people think that rules for everyday use are the competitive tournament rules, the only place Legends rules are not allowed. So in 11th edition, Games Workshop has to define the ways to play. As examples, let's call them balanced play. The term may become ironic at times, but this is intended to serve as your everyday pickup game, 90% of games, and it does include Legends. Then there is Crusade play. You use the Crusade supplement and can use the missions there and level up your army. Then there is Tournament play, strictly for tournaments with extra restrictions, but these are mostly made by the tournament organizers and have included no Legends rules, maybe no Titans, and at one time for some tournaments, no Eldari. Then we have the separate game modes, which would operate in their basic form as balanced play. Then you would tweak them for Crusade or for tournaments. So boarding actions for that game mode and restricted game size, and Combat Patrol for using the Combat Patrol boxes against each other. Combat Patrol is a good mode. I like that. Good to get started, good to have something that feels like a small army in a box. What it needs is the balance and support that Age of Sigmar's Spearhead received. But I know why Combat Patrol is unbalanced. It started as the start collecting boxes that was suddenly handed a game mode to encourage people to buy the boxes. I would like to see rules to make your own version of Combat Patrol, like the older 40k in 40 minutes. If you have seen channels showing off a battle report in 40 minutes, the battle was recorded over 5 to 6 hours and then edited down to 40 minutes. I mean, the game itself of 40k should take about 40 minutes to play so that you can get a game in if you have a 1 hour lunch break. You know, if you get them. And you don't eat. So rules for 10th edition on that would be roughly 400 points, no epic heroes, no toughness over 11, no more than 20 wounds in a unit, and maybe some kind of ban on 2+ saves. So what about those army sizes? Aside from like a Combat Patrol mode. Having games on different board sizes could work again. I thought that 44 inches by 30 inches for 1000 points was usually good. Boards accepted. But we've seen that a Warcry board of 22 inches by 30 inches works well for Age of Sigmar Spearhead. We could change 40k to be in different tiers of up to 750 points, 1500 points, 2250 points, and 3000 point sized games. It may just be a case of the streamer gets the audience that they cultivate, but more and more I've seen in your comments about how 1250 points has become a local tournament standard. It used to be 1850 points an edition or two ago, because 2000 points takes too long. If you think of two quick players having a casual 2000 points, With getting things set up and then put away, at tournament speed, you are looking at about 4 hours. Smaller games are so much better and far less stressful because they don't take as long. There is less on the line. You haven't got the sunk fallacy thing of, well, I know I'm going in for a penny, so we're going in for a pound. If you are facing Imperial Knights and know that you can't take them, you have to decide if you go home or commit to several hours knowing you'll get crushed. It is half as bad if the game is half as long. Then you have time to play someone else. A lot of the bitterness and the need to get good goes away if there isn't such a big investment in time as well as money. But we'll come back to that one. If a standard game was 1,000 points, then we wouldn't have Games Workshop saying that Deathwatch should be a small part of Imperial Agents and rarely, if ever, fielded as a full Watch Fortress. While players have to have a full Watch Fortress worth of models on the table just to get to 2,000 points of Deathwatch. The lore isn't going to match if the army size of a standard army is so high. So we should reduce army sizes. Smaller games should be considered the norm. That's what we should be seeing on Warhammer Plus, in White Dwarf battle reports and things like that. Push for 1,000 points or 1,500 points as a Games Workshop tournament, and a lot of people will copy that because you don't need to think about your own tournament restrictions. You just copy, paste, and you're done. I'm finding that a lot more focused down detachments, like the Genestealer Cult detachments, work better at lower points, because then you can use all of the units, like the maximum number of units that will get the bonuses of the detachment. And that is your army. You haven't got other units that are not getting those bonuses. And you could add in more tournament-specific restrictions, like no more than 2 of a datasheet. That has been done before, depending on the game size. And you could have it based on unit keywords in addition to faction keywords and like general keywords. I'm thinking something to stop the I can only have 2 of a datasheet, but I've included 2 Chaos Space Marine Demon Princes and 2 Chaos Demon Princes, to use a past edition example, or when thinking of 10th edition, I have 2 Gladiator Lancers and 2 Black Templars Gladiator Lancers in my Ironstorm detachment. It is legal because they are different datasheets. We would just have to see if we adapt the keywords as they already are, or we add an extra set of keywords, because I could see it being clearly understood as, oh, that means I'm only allowed to take 2 infantry units. Just some level of name keywords. We are very much in wishlist territory, but that is how this video works. It is how hope works. Hope isn't some frail thing that dies easily. Hope doesn't care how many times it has been burned before. Hope gets battered and stands up again and keeps going to fight for you because you are allowed to want things to be better. Army building. I would like a return of points per weapon. If you're unfamiliar with things before 10th edition, there used to be a separate points value for each weapon because then you can balance a las pistol compared to a bolt pistol or a plasma pistol on an Imperial Guard Sergeant. In 10th edition, those are options. They cost no different points, but they do very different things and have very different power. The points differences between weapons don't have to be drastic. It could be like 3 points to have a melter gun instead of a bolt gun on a Battle Sister squad. It could be 2 points to have a flamer instead of a bolt gun on a Battle Sister squad. What I don't want is there to be such a points difference between the weapons to not having the special weapons that all of your units get cut down into what we had before, where it was, oh, this unit is just holding objectives, they get no special weapons. This unit is going to be fighting, so I will take the best special weapons. Small differences in points can make that happen. I would like to keep detachments as they are. My expectation for 11th edition is that they will. Then we have no forced colour schemes or the feeding of counts as blue scars, where they are clearly ultramarines but you're using the white scars rules because they were better at the time. You can just use whatever fits your collection. So my Imperial Fists are not forced or encouraged to use Gravis armor, but I think detachments as a whole have stratagems that are too focused on too few units. The best detachments give you flexibility. The Salamander style detachment requires transports. As soon as they are down, most of your stratagems stop working. In contrast, the Bringers of Flame detachment, which is very, very similar, can work fine without transports. Each detachment currently comes with stratagems. This is fine because it massively reduces the number of stratagems you use in your games. It pares them down to the ones that will suit the detachment you're using, and the units you pick for the detachment are going to be the ones that work best in that detachment. This is, of course, generally seen as a massive improvement over 9th edition, where you would be flicking through multiple A4 pages all full of stratagems to find that one stratagem that's going to completely turn the game around and save your unit, or make you win against an enemy and wound them when you shouldn't, but you can. But there was just too many stratagems. I don't know if we should cut them down a little bit further. For example, every faction has one common stratagem in every detachment. If you look at the Space Marine detachments, they all have an Armor of Contempt, so for the opponents of any faction, you always know one thing to expect from an enemy army. I think that could work. I do think stratagems work way better in this edition than in the previous 2 editions. And I like the colours and symbols on the stratagems to indicate when they can be used. So let's introduce that to the abilities on your unit cards. Then I know to check to issue an order to my Kazakin in the command phase, or that there is a bonus to shooting and combat for the acolytes with demo charges and hand flamers. It's a little bit of player interface. It makes things easier to understand. That's what we should be aiming for. Then with a look at a symbol and a colour, I know when to use that ability, and I'm not trying to read the whole thing through just to check that I don't need to activate it yet, or that I should have activated it, or that I activate it now, and why am I not activating it? Point 3 on the army building is psychic powers. We should have a return of sorts to having free choice of psychic powers. I don't think we need to have a psychic phase, which depended on your army, you would either not get it or spend ages on it, but having more choice in psychic power would be good. So you have your psychic ability on your unit card. You can swap that out for one of 3 psychic powers for your faction, and you can't have the same one more than once, with the exception of those that are on your datasheet. So if you had 3 Chaos Sorcerers and 2 Sorcerers in Terminator armor, each of the regular Sorcerers could swap out their ability that's on their data card for one of the psychic core disciplines of their faction. But then the 2 Sorcerers in Terminator armor could keep the same one they have on their data card. There's no requirement to swap it out, and you can have multiple people with the same basic on the datasheet psychic power. It's just that each of the core discipline powers can only be taken once per army. Unit stats could be a little bit improved. I know that for like all of the additions, we have been familiar with a wounds characteristic, but I think the wounds characteristic should be changed to health. This matches something that happened in Age of Sigmar, and it makes more sense. Having to explain to people multiple times that the Palatine can inflict mortal wounds when you successfully wound your enemy. Wounding them is not reducing the enemy wounds. It is a successful wound roll. We shouldn't have 2 words that are very similar but activate at different steps. And with lethal hits, which is a successful wound, you might not need to roll to wound at all. So in the current rules, the Palatine does not need to reduce a wound characteristic to be considered to have wounded the enemy. Health works, but let's not call them hit points, because then that gets mixed up with hits. I like the objective control characteristic and really hope it stays into the next edition. The older objective secured rules could easily be done wrong. If you had 2 Battle Sisters on an objective against 3 Orc Knobs, well, the Battle Sisters were objective secured, so it didn't matter that there were 3 Orc Knobs and 2 Sisters, the Battle Sisters controlled that objective because they had objective secured. If a single regular Orc Boy then joined that objective, someone who also has objective secured, the general thought of a lot of people was, well, you compare the number of models that have objective secured. So there are 2 Battle Sisters with objective secured and 1 Orc Boy with objective secured. So the Battle Sisters should have it. And that wasn't the case. It is as soon as you have 2 instances of objective secured, they cancel each other out and the rule does not apply. In which case then, the 3 Knobs and the 1 Orc Boy would control the objective and not the 2 Battle Sisters. Having objective control is easier. And then you don't need to worry about, have I got enough models across 2 objectives? Do I score both objectives? Can I only score 1? It's now dependent on models, not on units. I like it. When we add characters to units, and they are leading a unit, I think it should be better to say while part of an attached unit, because this gets rid of the confusion of while leading a unit, this activates an ability, but if every model in that squad is destroyed apart from that character, are they leading themselves? They are not, but that could be some confusion. What if a unit has two characters, say a Canonist and a Hospitaller? The Hospitaler's ability works while they are leading a unit. Well, in your regular thought process, you would have thought, oh, well, the Canonist is the leader of that unit, not the Hospitaller. So if it just said, while part of an attached unit, that would be better. Then we know that if there is more than one character in a unit, you don't need to logically figure out which one is leading, but both characters can use their abilities because they are both part of an attached unit. I know the rules commentary clarifies, but you shouldn't need such an extensive rules commentary if more of the rules were worded in simpler English and were worded the same as other abilities that do the same thing. I would love it if, much like Warpedia, or exactly like Warpedia does it, rather than just having a list of which units characters can join, also have a list on the unit for which leaders can join them. That way I don't need to cycle through all the Space Marine characters to find the one that can join my tactical squad. It also means that if Games Workshop wants to add a new unit to a faction like the Hernkin Jaegers or a new Legends datasheet, you don't have to have a strange line that anything that can join X unit can also join this unit. You get to see a list of characters. That would also stop an issue that happened shortly after the Space Marine Codex came out, where Deathwatch and Space Wolves and other Divergent chapters, they had, if a character can join a Vanguard veteran unit, it can also lead this unit. Vanguard veterans were moved to Legends, and Codex chapters stopped listing Vanguard veterans as an option. It was quite the facepalm moment. We should also merge vehicles and monsters into the keyword of large, or behemoth. Why is a Wraithlord a monster, not a vehicle, when a Wave Serpent that is made of the same substance is a vehicle? Why would a Chain Fist be good on a tank, but not at cutting a Carnifex's leg? We don't have vehicle facings anymore like in 7th edition, so we don't need separate rules for vehicles and monsters. We already have distinctions between models on big circle bases and those on oval bases or no bases, and the pivot tax to move. Those rules exist in 10th edition, and this would mean that monsters get access to Tank Shock, or a near identical reworded version, which has been a complaint point for Tyranid players for the whole edition. Okay, here's another thought I've had, and I don't know where to put it other than on the internet. One-shot weapons. That appears on a lot of weapons like hunter-killer missiles, and it should just be in the main rules. Then there can be an explainer about replacement units, and we don't have the Genestealer Occult replacement unit and demo charge confusion that lasted for many, many months. That's a quick one. Here's a longer one, a maybe more controversial one. We should get rid of Feel No Pain. Feel No Pain is a really irritating rule. You get through the enemy toughness and the armor save, and then they roll a bunch more unmodified dice, and actually, no, you did no damage. For enemies that are taking multiple damage, this is a really time-consuming effort. I roll my shots to hit, then to wound, then you make the saves. Okay, they can be done in batches. Then, one slow dice at a time, I roll the damage roll. Then you take that many Feel No Pain saves. Then I roll the next damage dice, and you roll the next set of Feel No Pain saves. Back and forth, very slowly. We should be able to adapt past this. Feel No Pain worked much better when it was in 7th edition, and there was no such thing as a multi-damage weapon. Everything was damage 1. Space Marines had 1 wound. It was rare to have more, and if a shot had a strength double than your toughness, you died, regardless of the number of wounds you had. If you changed Feel No Pain to be -1 damage, which is something that the Death Guard did between 8th and 9th edition, well, if we did that at least on multi-wound models, that would give you the equivalent of a 4+ Feel No Pain against damage 2 weapons, or a 5+ Feel No Pain against damage 3 weapons, and a 6+ Feel No Pain against an Exorcist missile with a miracle dice of a 6 to cause maximum damage. Just having -1 damage as the rule is better. Or, if you want the naked man running at you to be able to take a bullet to the chest and keep coming, don't give the Arco-Flagellant a Feel No Pain, give them an extra wound. Like they already are. They're 2 wounds, and maybe the -1 damage version of the Feel No Pain could be applied then. There are so many other stats in 40k to represent the durability of units. We have toughness, we have saves, we have wounds, we have invulnerable saves. Use them, not extra special rules that take a long time to process in the game. To use some other examples, Aberrants have a 5+ feel no pain on their 3 wounds, so on average, they can take 4 shots to kill. Make them 4 wounds. Metamorphs are more difficult as they have 1 wound and a 5+ feel no pain, but if you want them to be more resilient, make them toughness 5. They are about as tough looking as an orc. Now that I've mentioned all this stuff about feel no pain, are you realizing, oh yeah, as soon as I'm hitting a model that has more than 1 wound, feel no pain saves take a long time to do. The problem we have with changing this for 11th edition, 11th edition is expected to be compatible with 10th edition, so units rules should carry over. That is why I would switch the rule to mean -1 damage to a minimum of 1. The clarification of to a minimum of 1 is already in the rules commentary. Then, over the rest of 10th edition and 11th edition as codexes are released, the rule could be phased out. On the theme of dice taking a long time to roll for no particular reason, I would like to stop invulnerable saves that are better than a 4+. Like Feel No Pain, it takes so long to roll it slow for Ghazghkull's Makari and the Dark Eldar Archon. Just have a 4+ invulnerable save and a -1 damage. One of them. Both of them. Whatever you want. There are other ways to represent durability. Let's move on from the rules for models and just talk about models. Models should be cheaper. Remember that you are allowed to want things to be better. If we are thinking of changes we want to see with 40k, let's not avoid that they should sell the models for less money than they do now. I don't see why this should be one point of, oh well, they will never do that. Why can't we want that? We should want that and shouldn't censor ourselves or think that asking for better buying terms as consumers is an impossibility. So Games Workshop should give us cheaper models. We have seen from the Combat Patrol magazine and all the other similar running issues that they can sell models at £10 for 5. That is £2 per model. So why should they be £4 or more in discount Christmas boxes or sold at £8 each in a regular box? And this is what would be better for me and a lot of my audience. Vtubers, YouTubers, anyone gets the audience that resonates with them. So I am now at the point where I know what I want to see, and that will probably sound good to you. If there are more things, or not all the things, or you never thought about one thing before but now you want it, I just hope YouTube provides a space somewhere where you could type some sort of comment. It also sounds good to me to have money, so a few pounds my digital tip jar is appreciated. Or we have a deal. If you want to buy Games Workshop models, you can get them cheaper than Games Workshop by going through my affiliate links. If you use the affiliate links, then the affiliates give me money. It's a win-win-win deal. So on those models, no more multi-part monopose models. Like the Battle Sister box, where they have to be built in one pose from a lot of parts. Fundamentally, I want to see a shift back in model design philosophy. The Tactical Squad, the Genestealer Cult Acolytes, these are good kits and they can be built without instructions because you're just attaching arms to bodies. The Adeptus Sororitas models can't. They feel like you are fixing someone else's model that has gotten broken. Rather than going for the route of let's try and figure out some new unit and throw it out there and see if people like it, update the older models, the Eldar range especially. The Warp Spiders have been the same models for more than 30 years. We know that this is a Games Workshop problem, and that is why in 10th edition, we have seen kill teams and individual characters as the main releases. It seems like they're running out of shelf space, and they know it. If you have a physical store, you have a limited amount of space for Games Workshop products, even in the Games Workshop Warhammer store, so you can't have everything because the range is vast. If one product, Space Marines, sells really well, but you only stock 20 boxes because you also left space for Necron Warriors, Cataphron Breachers, and Acadian Command Squad, you have lost potential money if there was demand for 40 Plasmarius Inceptionius Marines. So Games Workshop knows about the problem and is fixing it with limited releases, the Kill Team boxes that work in 2 game systems, with characters that don't take up much shelf space and have a high markup on the price. I don't like the price part, but I can see why Games Workshop could be doing it. And it sucks for retailers who have an agreement with Games Workshop not to sell the models at a lower than X percentage price. That needs to go so that the third-party stores aren't thinking, do I get this new thing? Can I still sell them in 6 months from now at the same price? Let me know if you want me to talk for 15 minutes or so about shelves and what's on them. Games Workshop loves it when you can make multiple units out of one box. It is less for them to have to stock. The Acolyte Hybrid box builds 3 different units, but a lot of units could and should be consolidated. Like the Centurions, bigger Space Marine armor with missiles and heavy bolters. Other weapons also exist. Or the Gravis Marine Aggressors, with missiles and 2 Stormbolt gauntlets on their fist. And then Terminators with a big fist, a twin bolter weapon, and the option of missiles. They're too similar, and obviously you keep the Terminators. And this is why we have Legends. So how do we deal with Legends? If a unit isn't available to be sold by Games Workshop, they don't put it in the Codex. They can't advertise products that they don't sell. Okay, tangent time. Should a Codex just be digital? Probably not. That would exclude people who are digitally unsure. That isn't just older people. I once worked with someone who thought the government was out to get him and scanning a QR code would activate magical devices planted in his phone while he slept so that the government could track him. And I said, well, wouldn't the government already have to know where you are and which one is your phone to install the tracking software? And he stopped talking to me after that, which I appreciated. But he still deserves to be able to play 40k. I like the existence of a codex. I could rant about the massive reduction in art and lore that the more recent codexes have, but this recording is approaching an hour and a half and I know I'll have to cut something, otherwise it just will not be watchable. The rules change too often and too drastically, which makes the codex seem obsolete. So let's get the launch of 11th edition to have good working rules. I want something different for the initial release of 11th edition compared to 10th edition. If Games Workshop wants physical books like a physical rulebook, fine. But release the rules for 11th edition digitally to all of us. Games Workshop does not have enough playtesters and relies on the community to sort out the messy start of the edition, like we did with 10th edition. So, almost like what they did with teasing a faction a day in the lead up to 10th edition, release a faction's 11th edition rules every day. Release the core rules. With thousands of people looking over it, we can catch issues really quickly. Then, 6 months later, after mass community testing and some rules changes that are also tested, then release the resolved 11th edition rules, and there you go. We will have working core rules, hopefully also fun and easy to learn. Easy to learn so that new players can enter after some Vtuber talking about Space Marine 2 caught their attention and they want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes, and some people who skipped out on a few editions come in and not die under a pile of absurd rules that they haven't got a grasp of. And fun because that is the purpose of a rule set. If you're playing a game, it should be fun. So once 11th edition is worked out digitally with the community, then the book can be released and it will work. And that doesn't need to be changed, like barely or at all. So I was talking about Legends. High-end tournaments and Legends. Games Workshop has said it is unfair if some units are meta and not sold to be available to all players. That is it. That is ostensibly the reason for Legends as a separate list of units. So the app should have Legends by default and a setting for tournament mode that removes them. It better sets up the difference. They want you to play and have fun with Legends units so that your Games Workshop models retain value. Just that they are not tournament compatible for the one reason. So they release 11th edition. There'll be a starter set. The Space Marines in the starter set could be from a chapter and have specific chapter iconography. Just limited things. It was cool to have Ravenwing Bikers and Deathwing Terminators in 6th and 7th edition. I just don't want them to be that detailed. Just some optional extras to make them look like a Blood Angel, like add a chalice piece that they didn't have to have added on. Then you can see, ah yes, these are blood angels. It's a nice option. And what I'm going to put as the final thing for this video, keep tactical marines. They're in the 10th edition Codex, but missing in the Space Marine Crusade rules. If they gave us new models in true scale Mark 7 or Mark 8 or Mark 9 armor, that would be great. Because right now it's hard to know where the law sits for progression. You have scouts and then what? Intercessors? When do you join a tactical squad? Do you join a devastator squad? The tactical squads are meant to be versatile. They are soldiers who know how to use all the weapons because they've been in the Devastator Company and the Assault Company. So give them bolt guns and chainswords as weapons. The cool Space Marine aesthetic loadout. The two weapons that you think of as 40k Space Marine weapons. A popular idea is to remove the intercessors and upgrade them to tactical marines. The original role in 8th edition of intercessors of being a bigger, tougher marine with bolt guns has been taken over again by heavy intercessors. Big, tough marines with special bolt guns. So remove intercessors and have a tactical squad. You could even have it be a squad of 5 with just bolt guns and then go up to a squad of 10 with a special weapon and a heavy weapon, to make it that they represent experienced marines who have been through the companies. Add heavy as a keyword on their bolt guns, add lance on their basic close combat attacks, and that flexibility is from like their index rule, the tactical doctrine, but all of the time. They don't need to have combat squads if you could take them as a squad of 5. You know, you don't even need to get rid of the intercessor box. Just do as they do in Horus Heresy and add an upgrade sprue. Now the intercessors can have one Space Marine flamer, one missile launcher, or a plasma gun, or a las cannon, and so on. You would get one of each set of weapons on a sprue, and there you go. Now you still have a tactical squad, so a new upgrade kit can be sold. You save so much shelf space without having to rebox an intercessor unit, and there are rules for players with tactical squads to keep using tactical squads. I would want Mark 7 helmets though. Everyone agrees, well, a lot of people agree, and we can take the majority as everyone now agrees because that's how democracy works. This helmet is the best helmet, the Mark 7 one. But I think any talk of tactical marines I'll leave for another video. But can you imagine a tactical squad in the 11th edition starter set? And we go from, yeah, of course there's a tactical squad box, to tactical marines! Let's go! If you want to hear me talk for a long time with supervision about some rules I like, this is the video to watch. But what do you think of these 11th edition ideas? Do you like some of these, all of these, or none of these? I know you don't agree with all my thoughts, or perhaps I am just objectively correct. If you work for Games Workshop, would you like to implement these as rules? That is not necessarily a hypothetical question. And you should have a great day of 40k.